Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Matt Gagel. I am the Director of Programs at Montgomery History, and we're very glad you're here tonight. Before we get started with tonight's fantastic program, a few things that I'd like to go over. First of all, I do again want to thank everyone who's made financial financial donations to Montgomery History. We wouldn't be able to offer free programs such as this or many other history conversations programs without your support. And for that, we are immensely grateful. If you'd like to make a donation, you can visit our website at montgomeryhistory.org and click on the Donate Now button, and that'll guide you through the process. And again, thank you for all of those who have done so. We are extremely grateful. If you missed last week's talk, you can certainly visit our website at montgomeryhistory.org/mhconnected/watch, and that'll take you to a recording of last week's talk, which was about the history of the C&O Canal Association and information about the upcoming World Canals Conference, which if you are interested in the history of canals, it is worth checking out. If you have a question during the presentation, please use the Q&A button that will come to me. We will be doing a Q&A at the end. We will try to get to as many questions as we possibly can. And again, we'll do our best, but we may not be able to get to everything. Next week, we'll be doing a rewind in honor of the Montgomery County Agricultural Fair. We'll be talking about a previous episode of Paths to the Present, which will be about the history of Montgomery County barns. That will premiere on our website on this coming Monday at 10 a.m., and that will be available for a week. And then during the week of August 23rd, we'll be taking a short programming break. You can visit our website. There's definitely still stuff to discover and learn on our website. We have lots of online exhibits, digital repository, and just so much more content. Just visit montgomeryhistory.org and you can click on any of the links there to explore the various content and historical resources that we have. And then we'll be back the week of August 30th. Okay, that's all I have. Again, thanks for joining us. I am going to hand it over to Emily Rogers, who is the operations manager at Glen Echo Park Partnership for the Arts and Culture. Emily, are you there?
I am here, Matt. Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you, Montgomery History, for being our collaborator and partner on this wonderful series. It really has been amazing to partner with you guys, so thank you so much for your support. As Matt said, I'm Emily Rogers. I'm the operations manager here for the Glen Echo Park Partnership for Arts and Culture. Together with Montgomery County and the National Park Service, we manage the arts programs and historic buildings at Glen Echo Park. And we also operate the historic band organ and carousel that we are going to be talking about today, as well as presenting art shows in our galleries, producing festivals and social dances, and lots more. With some of the pandemic restrictions lifted, we have lots of happy kids riding the carousel, which has been fantastic this summer. And we're presenting some more in-person events, including a free summer concert series and carousel family days. You can find out all about what the park is doing this summer at glenechopark.org. I want to welcome everyone to the fourth and final lecture series that we have for our Carousel 100th anniversary celebration. We're so glad that you've joined us to learn all about the restoration of the Dentzel Carousel. Our months-long celebration would not be possible without the generous support from our sponsors, so I'd like to take a moment and thank them. We're so grateful for support from major sponsors, including the Maryland Heritage Areas Authority, the Maryland State Arts Council, Heritage Montgomery, Long and Foster, Geico, Montgomery County, the National Park Service, and our longtime supporter and sponsor, Carol Trewick. Thank you to all of them. Before I introduce our speaker, I also want to mention that we hope that you all will join us this weekend for our next Carousel Family Day event. We are partnering with the Carousel Organ Association of America to present a band organ rally here on the park grounds this Saturday and Sunday, August 14th and 15th. You can find all the details at our website, glenechopark.org/carousel100. And now I'd like to introduce Rosa Patton to discuss the painting style of Dentzel Carousel Company and restoration techniques. Rosa has been restoring carousels and band organ fronts for the past 43 years. Her resume includes restoration of carousels and pieces from all over the country. Educated as an art teacher, Rosa has worked on fairground art since 1978. And now to Rosa.
Thank you, Emily. I'm going to go through a few pieces on the carousel and here at Glen Echo and show you how they were restored and some of the techniques that I used to restore them. The restoration of the carousel started in the late 1970s when Nick Bellows, who was a curator for the National Park Service, hired a professional conservator to clean some of the areas on the Indian Horse, which is here. The first photo shows a black and white installation photograph of the carousel dated 1921. And although it was not a color photograph, he could see darks and lights. He could see color blendings, if not the color, and he could see pinstripes and designs. In 1980, I was hired to clean the Indian Horse to its original factory paint layer. This turned into a 40-year history for me with my association with this carousel and the paint on this machine. And my husband, Ron, reminded me when I was doing this talk or planning this talk, that I've been involved with the carousel for 40 of its 100 years, which gives me chills. I want to go over two or three animals in this area and tell you how I went about restoring the animals, as well as the ceiling panels, the center barrel panels, the upper trim, and the band organ. Before I get into this, I want to warn people about the dangers of lead paint and disturbing lead paint. Lead was only removed from commercial paint in 1978. So any paint applied before 1978 has lead in it. And if you sand it and disturb it, you will ingest it and it will get into your system, and it is not healthy. Nick Bellows, the curator, had the paint on the original layer analyzed. And not only did it contain lead, but it contained mercury, arsenic along with the lead. So you need to be very careful about any of the techniques that I show you. I have some materials also that I'm going to show you that are dangerous to use. So you really do have to be careful about using these things and disturbing lead paint. On the second photo, I want to show you how this horse looked when I first saw the carousel. And as I said, my first project on the carousel in 1980 was to clean it to its original paint layer, touch it up, and coat it with a reversible varnish. I mostly did that with a heat gun and an X-Acto knife, where I used just a little bit of heat and heated up the many layers that were on the animal, and then scraped them with an X-Acto knife. The Park Service, who was overseeing this project, required that I clean down to every single layer of paint and notate it and record it. So I'm going to show you a little bit more about that on the second animal. I also used some chemicals to clean away the old paint. And again, you need to be very careful with any kind of paint stripper or any kind of cleaning chemical that you use that will clean away old paint. The colors that I found and the process was written up in a thorough report. I have one here. I'm not sure it's for this animal, but as you can see, it's very thorough, contains paint notations, tracings of original designs that I found. and all that. And every animal or group of animals that I did required that kind of report for the Park Service. The restoration of this animal, you can see, please do not ride. And it resulted in a surface that was really too delicate for riding. So the national, and I think there were complaints about that from the public. And people were afraid that they were all going to be restored this way and they wouldn't be able to ride the carousel, that it would become a museum piece rather than something you could ride and enjoy. So we knew we had to come up with a technique of restoring that was durable enough to withstand the thousands of people that ride it every year. And still, we wanted to save that original paint, not completely take it off. So I want to move over to what I call the loop horse, because he has this beautiful, these beautiful carvings of loops here. And this is what we came up with of how to restore these animals, leaving a durable surface that you could ride and enjoy. So the third photo is a before photo of the loop horse, and he looked just like the Indian horse. You know, he's just brown and many, many layers of paint. There were areas on all the horses that had maybe 20 layers of paint. I mean, it was just amazing. Someone had put paint on every year for years and years and years. The next slide shows sample areas that I did on this horse. They were cleaned. I tried to be organized and clean about it, but I had to clean clean to every layer of paint. And so I labeled all the areas with numbers and letters, just showing what was there over the years. I also matched all the colors to the Munsell Book of Color, and I don't believe I brought that in, but it is a universal color book for matching paint. If a special design, the next slide shows the design, a design on not this horse, but another horse. But if a special design showed up, I did tracings of that design on the original layer. So that slide shows the design that I found on another horse. The next, after the sample areas were done and the tracings were done, and all the color matching was done, and I was absolutely sure what the original paint looked like, the animal was cleaned of all the unstable layers of paint. I might have taken 2 layers or 3 layers or 4 layers off, but I did not disturb the original paint anymore. You know, I just cleaned down to the first stable layer of paint that I knew would survive the riding. And then the whole surface was coated on the 8th slide with paraloid B72 and tinted white shellac. And then the next slide shows how I filled the surface and sanded and primed, and I did this again and again until the animal was smooth enough to paint. Number 10 shows that it was then decorated with a cream colored commercial paint, which I used as a base coat. And number 11 shows how I started to put on the decorative coats, the silver leaf or the aluminum leaf, and then this would be what the finished animal finally looked like. And they are coated with about 5 coats of spar varnish. So there are many, many layers now on protective layers that protect the original paint. The original paint is still there, but you can ride it. I want to give you, I'll show you some things over at my table here, some of the materials that I used, and actually give you a demonstration of some painting techniques that were used when I was doing the restoration. Originally in the factory, carousel animals were painted with Japan color. And this is a pigment that's ground in oil. And it was mixed with white lead paint. That's where all that lead comes from, or where the most of it comes from on the carousel animals. And that combination of materials, when you get to it, when I'm scraping down to the original paint, when you get to that layer, you know it because it is like a rock, and it's not very thick, it's very thin. It's, you know, it's good paint, but it's very toxic. So we decided that we would come up with an alternative to using Japan color, and because you couldn't use lead, it would be bad to use the lead paint. So what we did was we decided, Nick and I should say, decided that I would use artist oils for the bodies. So you can blend, and like the Indian paint, the color is very well blended. And use sign painter's paint for durability on the saddles and the tack. And of course, as some of you may know, this carousel, it was fashionable to have glazed aluminum, and I'm going to show you how to glaze aluminum in just a minute, but a lot of it, especially on the outside row, has glazed aluminum leaf. I also used a glue if I had to do woodwork, and there was minimal woodwork on this carousel. That was a delightful part for me. But we used West System epoxy, and that worked really well with some of their fillers that you can use for different purposes. I wanted to show you some of the brushes that were used. These brushes were available back in 1921 when the carousel was made. So I think the brushes that I use, they're pretty universal and timeless. I mean, they were used then, they're used now for many purposes. So the decorative layers, like I said, have what were the bodies were what I call stippling. They were stippled, and I'm going to show you what I mean by stippling. I'm going to stipple two colors together, a brown and a white. And I actually am quite sloppy when I put this part on, even on a horse. This is a stippling brush. Stippling is simply moving paint around by going up and down. And I'm blending it into the white. So when you see something like on the Indian horse, where the edges are not hard edges, they're not like lined edges, it was stippled. And they probably used a brush like I'm using now, and then they would finish it with a softer brush called a mop. And that will just take all the marks out and make a nice blended surface. So you end up, you can see you've got a really nice soft edge here. And you can go over it and over it and over it again and again and again until it's perfect. I mean, you know, these brushes work really well doing the stippling. So right here, I'm going to show you this animal is dappled, and it's done a little bit in a little bit different way. So I'm going to start out with some white paint, just a thin layer. And I didn't mention that I sometimes use a medium called Liquin. And I just mixed, I've got some on my palette, and I just mixed a little bit with each color. And you use a smaller stippling brush. You can see these brushes are shaped the same way, but one's just bigger than the other. So if I was doing a big area, like a big area on the horse, I would stipple with this brush instead of this one. But for the dapples, you don't want a lot of paint, and you just very carefully stipple the dapples on. And you don't want them to be too evenly done. And again, you can take a softer brush and finish up. I think I'll use this one. But you can get the idea here of how that was done. And I think I'm using brown. They used black to do the dapples. But stippling is kind of addictive. You kind of get into it, and especially doing dapples. I love doing dapples. The second thing I want to show you is the aluminum leaf. Now I put this morning, so I'm not sure this is going to work, but I put what's called slow set gold size on this little area right here where I'm going to put some silver leaf. And it sets up in about 12 hours. I have another one that sets up in about an hour or 3 hours. And I used the slow set on this one. And I'm going to put just a piece of the leaf, and I'll show you it, the box for it. But you put it on, and aluminum leaf can be handled with your hands. Gold leaf, for those of you who use it, you know, cannot be. It has special tools, but there is no gold leaf on the animals. There is some gold leaf that I found on the rounding boards, but not on the animals. And I burnish it with just a soft cloth, like this is a little bit dry, but it works enough to show you how it works. You burnish it with a soft cloth, like a piece of fleece. And then here I have some aluminum leaf that I did earlier, and I let it dry. I did the size, the leaf, and then I let it dry, and I put a coat of varnish on top. And the varnish you put on top is just to, because I'm going to glaze it, it's just to protect the leaf and keep it from coming off. If you don't put the varnish on, it could lift the leaf up. So I'm going to show you when you glaze aluminum, like the aluminum on this horse, and like most of the outside row has some glazed aluminum on it. But I'm going to show you how you get these metallic colors on this sample board here that I've prepared. And again, I use a little bit of liquid, as you can see on my palette. And on this palette, I'm going to use the green, I think. And this is a Viridian green. The thing about glazing aluminum, you cannot use white. You can't mix white with the paint that you use. If you want your green to be lighter, you just put on less green. White will ruin it. So you don't want to ever use white. So this is Viridian green, but you can see how the metallic, it becomes a metallic quality, has a metallic quality. And you can brush it on, you can stipple it with a soft brush, you can blend it out on the edges. I sometimes use a fan brush, which is another blending brush. So you can kind of see on these animals, if you look around at them, sometimes I used a yellow ochre, which makes it look kind of golden. Sometimes I used one of my favorites, alizarin crimson, which is a really wonderful red. And some colors are stronger than others. So if you're trying to be tasteful, you need to do it gently. And what I did in matching these glazed aluminum parts on the animals is that I tried to reproduce the same amount of glaze color that they had on it originally. And the next thing I want to demonstrate to you, like I said, the animals had no gold leaf on them. They only had aluminum leaf with glazes, and once on several of the animals, not really very many, they had bronzing powders. Now I want to demonstrate the bronzing powders because the band organ, on the other hand, that you're going to see, we're going to talk about later, Wurlitzer only used bronzing powders on their organs. They did not use gold leaf. So I'm going to show you, let's see, this is the pearl copper, it says, which is a kind of an orange color. And you can see in the can, it's just a powder. This is something you need to be careful with. You need to do it outdoors, because if you do it indoors, this stuff floats and you're going to have it. If you do a lot of it, you're going to have it everywhere. So you need to be very careful. The reason I have black and white is because some of these, as you will see, like the green, will only work on black. If you put it on white, the green mysteriously just turns kind of tan and isn't green at all. So I'm going to put it on both, and you can see, but I'm going to take a little of the powder on my fleece, and you can see it makes a metallic color. And this size, I probably forgot to say that the reason this sticks is because I put the same gold size that I put for the silver leaf onto these sections this morning. So they're a little bit sticky, and that's why the powder sticks in them. That's the orange color. And I especially want to show you the gold. Let me put some orange on the white. You can see it's not as vibrant if you put it on the white. Only on the black does it really work. And the green has always been a mystery to me, because you probably can't see it in the can, but it just looks white in the can. And yet when I put it, you can see it on the fleece here. It's just white. But if you put it on the black, it miraculously turns green. And there's a lot of green on the band organ and the orange. There is gold powder on some of the horses. So I want to do a little bit of gold and then we will move on. Gold doesn't work that well on black. It works better on the white. So that's bronzing powders. And I got these, I'm not sure that this company that makes bronzing powders is still in business, Crescent Bronze. And I actually no longer use bronzing powders on band organs because, as you will see when you look at the band organ, it has the bronzing powders, because they have bronze in them, have oxidized and turned brown. And so I use another, I'm not going to go into it here because I used bronzing powders on this organ. But so I'm not going to go into the powders that I use now, but it's the different, I use a different one that does not oxidize, and it's made of mica. Okay, I also wanted to, well, I'll talk about that later. Next, we want to get into looking at or talking about some of the other parts of the carousel that I restored. And the first I want to talk about is the ceiling panels and the center barrel panels. The ceiling panels, which are pretty hard to see, but I have some photographs of them that I want to show you. And the center barrel panels, I mean, the panels in the center that have the landscape paintings on them. All of this stuff, the ceiling panels and the barrel panels, were painted over several times. You could not see the landscapes. You could not see the beautiful flowers that are in frames that were painted on the ceiling panels. And the photo number 12 shows a ceiling panel section before and after restoration, or before and after cleaning. And I did the same thing. I cleaned sample area that I did on the animals. I cleaned sample areas as shown in the next photo. And after I determined which was the original layer, then I cleaned down to the original layer on the ceiling panels and the barrel panels. And I think I did use a methylene chloride paint remover on the ceiling panels and the barrel panels as well. And those were removed and taken to my studio. They were big and unruly, but we did take them there and restore them there. And I keep saying we because my husband, Ron, has helped me for years in my restoration business. So when I say we, I mean Ron and myself. On the 14th slide, I showed, I've just got in the 15th slide, I showed some of the ceiling panel designs that were uncovered. And, you know, they weren't in great shape when after I cleaned them, but there was enough there that I could touch them up and make them like they are today. So those two slides show you that some of the decoration that I found on these panels, on these ceiling panels. And I'm so glad they're there. I mean, I don't know, there may be another carousel, Dentzel carousel of this time period with ceiling panels that are original, but they're made of Upsom board, which is basically a thick cardboard. So they didn't survive. And if they ever get wet, it's going to be a sad day because they're not going to survive. The barrel panel design on the next slide, again, cleans to the original paint. You do the sample areas, you clean it to the original paint, you do touch up, and then this is what you have. So I've got, I think there are 7. You would think there would be 9, but I think there are 7. And there are other parts. So there's a column, which I did not include in any photographs, but there's a column between the barrel panels that were marbleized. So, you know, you've got a lot of different decoration techniques on this carousel. And, you know, I had to learn them all and reproduce them. The upper trim in photo 17 required a lead enclosure because the state of Maryland is very strict with lead laws. And we all, there were 4 of us who worked on that. There was, I worked on it, my husband Ron worked on it, Lisa Falstrom and Mayfield Piper all worked on that. And we had to all go to lead school, which Maryland, the state of Maryland sponsored. Same thing, sample areas. The next slide shows sketches that I did after doing sample areas and with color notations for each part of the rounding boards and the inner panels, upper mirror panels. We cleaned with the next slide shows us cleaning. I think that's me in that slide. Cleaning with TSP, and we repaired the damage if there was any, which was minimal. And then we sealed it all up with tinted white shellac or BIN primer. And then the next slide shows Lisa Falstrom painting. She's painting some of the inside cherubs and roses and that kind of thing. And then there's the last slide shows a finished section of those inner panels. But we did all that work on scaffolding, and it was usually done during the winter and when the carousel was not operating. And it was a miserable, I have to say, job. But the results were wonderful, and we really, finally, I really enjoyed it. The next thing I want to talk a little bit about is the band organ front. And Durward Center of Baltimore did the working mechanical restoration of the band organ. And so I want to show you some how we did that. First, we did I did sample areas to find the original paint on every layer ever put on. And the next slide shows some of the other designs that we found that were not part of the original paint. And I think in this slide, you can see a parrot that once decorated the organ. And you can barely see the outline in that slide of the man in the canoe, the very front of it.
Daniel, it looks like we've lost audio there in the video feed. I apologize, folks. I'm not sure what's going on here. We'll see if we can get this sorted. Give us just a moment. There we are. It looks like we're coming back. I apologize again for the little technical delay. Again, we don't currently have any audio, so hopefully I'm not sure if they're able to hear me. It doesn't quite seem like it. Give me just a moment, folks. All right, I apologize. We'll get this sorted here in just a moment. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what's happening here. It looks like we're frozen on a slide here. I'm going to try and get in touch with. I believe we're back.
Shows what I found and the touch up. And I found flowers, landscapes. It's a very exciting project to do for me. And the last photo is Bruce Douglas's color photo of the finished carousel compared to the 1921 photo. And I think that is a wonderful set of photos. Bruce's photo was done, set up to mimic or look like the 1921 photograph. So that kind of shows you the finished work, the rounding boards, everything. Okay, I'm ready for questions.
Okay, can you hear me? Hello? Is there anyone at Glen Echo can hear me at the moment?
Yes.
Oh, you can't hear me. Okay. We actually lost video and audio there for about a minute. Back. Oh, no, I forgot. I'm so busy trying to get us back in there. Before we showed the last picture, I believe there was a section when you moved over to the band organ that we lost. But we do have a couple questions that have come in, so we'll go ahead and get right on that. Okay. Someone asks, if the paint had lead, how did you safely heat and scrape it?
I couldn't hear it.
I'll go ahead and repeat it. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Someone asks, if the paint had lead, how did you safely heat and scrape it?
Well, I was very careful. I used mask. I should have brought a Tyvek suit, which means you cover all of your clothing, including your shoes if possible. You do it in a space that is contained. And in the case of the rounding boards, we had plastic sheeting all over. And we had to have a lead test done on the premises before we started the work, and we had specific cleaning techniques to clean up, and I did the same in my studio at home. And at the end of the project, we had to have another lead test done of the floor and the surrounding carousel. And I'm happy to say that the lead test, the last lead test when we finished, showed much less lead in the area than when we started. So we actually probably did it a favor, but, and everything is sealed up here and it's kept in good condition. And if there are any little chips or whatever, they're repaired. In a timely way. So it's all safe here. When I work on anything with lead, I always take great care.
Okay, thank you so much. It looks like someone chimed in and said that was the beginning of the band organ. We talked a bit about the band organ. Can you maybe go over a little bit more about just kind of a quick refresher on the stuff that we missed for the band organ restoration work you did?
Refresher on the band organ restoration. The band organ, I did the same way as the horses as far as cleaning to doing sample areas. And so I found out what was on each layer of paint first and numbered them and took photographs and matched the colors. And then when I identified the original layer, which you see, especially in the paintings here. I just cleaned to that layer, and I cleaned using sometimes methylene chloride paint remover, sometimes other chemicals, sometimes a heat gun. And then when on the paintings, I touched them up so that you could see what they are and clean them up. For the scroll work here, I cleaned to the first stable layer. I identified the colors first and did little drawings that show what colors go where in each section. And then I repainted them using what I found on the original layer, and I used the bronzing powders, which I demonstrated over here, which is what was there and what the Wurlitzer company traditionally used on their band organs. This band organ, I did an organ that was made in 1921, a style 165 facade. And it did not have, it had bronzing powders on it, but they were all gold. They were not colored bronzing powders like the green and the oranges that were here. And again, I see an area up here that used to be orange and it is now kind of brown because bronzing powders do tend to oxidize and turn brown. And as I said, I now on Wurlitzers use mica powders, which do not oxidize. I don't think I would change this one because of its history and because bronzing powders is what was used on it. So I would not go back and put mica powders on this now.
Okay, thank you so much, Rosa. I appreciate your willingness to go back on that. I'm going to go ahead and get to some of the other questions here. The next question I have here, did you paint the horses while they were still on their poles, or did you take them off first?
The animals were taken off and taken to North Carolina to my studio. And some years, I said I have a 40-year history with this machine. It took 20 years to actually restore the whole thing. And that is because some years I took, there was money to do one animal. Some years there was money to do 4 animals. And then at the end, there was a donation made, an anonymous donation that paid to have them done within, the rest of them done within a couple of years. So yes, they were taken off, the animals were taken off, everything was taken, the animals were taken off, the barrel panels were taken off, the ceiling panels were taken off, and we transported them to North Carolina to my studio to work on. The rounding boards, which weigh so much, they weigh probably 500 pounds a piece, and they're made out of cast plaster. We didn't think that they could survive being removed or survive well being removed and taken to my studio in North Carolina. So they were the only parts, the plaster pieces on the rounding boards and the inner mirror panels were the only pieces that were done on site, on scaffolding in the winter.
Okay, that kind of answers the next question, but a viewer asks, did you restore the entire body of the carousel in addition to the horses?
Did I restore the entire
The
body?
entirety of the carousel, yes.
No, I did not do the sweeps. The Park Service, I believe, painted the sweeps. I did do color sample areas on those sweeps, and any part that the Park Service worked on, I did color samples and specified a color for those. But the structure of the machine, I did not paint, no.
Okay. Next question I have here is, how long would you estimate the restoration took? How many hours do you think you put into this project?
I've never thought of that, so I'm afraid that I couldn't tell you that. An animal done by doing sample areas and a newly painted animal, I would guess took 250 hours maybe. If it was a larger animal like the lion or some of the larger animals, it may have taken more. I just don't know. The rounding boards, I don't, and the ceiling panels, I mean, it's phenomenal. That would be an interesting thing to do, to go back and try to figure out how many hours, man hours were spent on the carousel. I will think about that.
Okay. I want to say it's Lise Lipman says, "Hi Rosa, so lovely to hear this talk and see you. What varnish are you using now, since the varnishes are becoming harder to find?"
What kind of varnishes? Varnish is a tough problem. They're fussy. They respond differently to different types of weather. I used a spar varnish called Balin Water White Restoration Varnish on the animals, with the exception of the Indian horse. Balin Water White Restoration Varnish, which is not made anymore. So when we do touch up every couple of years, that is a problem. And I have recently discovered a varnish called Dephthane, which is an oil-based polyurethane. And after contacting the manufacturer, they assured me that it could be used over the spar varnish that is now on the animals. And it's actually a much better varnish. If it had been around 40 years ago, I probably would have used it. And I use a gloss varnish because the body oils of riders and the dirt is more easily repelled and easier to clean than a satin varnish. And originally, if you look at old black and white photographs of animals from the Dentzel company, they're glossy as they can be. You can see the gloss. So they used, I think they used a spar varnish too.
Okay. Let me see if, give me just one. Oh yes, okay. So you mentioned a book for paint color matching.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit more about that and the name of the book and your use of that?
I used the Munsell Book of Color, which is a very organized 2-volume book with color swatches in it, divided up into hues and values. And it's a universal color book that's been around for probably as long as this carousel, a long time. And it's particularly good for historic preservation applications. And I learned about it from probably Nick Bellows. And it was a requirement. So I had to get, I think for a while, I borrowed the 2-volume set from my North Carolina Division of Archives and History. And then someone was kind enough to give me a set at some point, so that I have worn out. And I am so used to using that even if I am buying Sherwin-Williams paint for something, I first use my Munsell Book of Color. They're very expensive. They cost probably $2,000 or $3,000 a set at this point. I haven't priced them lately, but they're very, I mean, the swatches were the same 50 years ago as they are today. And that's what makes them so wonderful to use.
Okay. The next question I have here is another technical question.
Mhm.
Why do you use epoxy rather than period wood filler?
A lot of people say that you should not use epoxy because it's not reversible. I use it because it's more durable and more predictable. It is reversible with a heat gun. And some of the animals, I built up areas that you would have to remove wood in order to replace with wood. And if I used an epoxy filler, I don't have to remove any of the original wood. For example, on saddles get worn. And if you replaced a wooden part of the saddle, you have to get everything flat and fit together. With epoxy, you just mix up a filler and put it on bare wood and sand it, and it's done. And if you want to get it off ever, you just use a little heat from the heat gun and you can take it off. So to me, epoxy in many ways is better than using the hide glue that they used originally.
Okay. Again, we got a lot of questions here. I'm trying to get to as many as we can. One that has come up repeatedly is people are asking if you, Rosa, have a particular horse or animal on the carousel that is your favorite.
I have several that are my favorites. I like this rose horse that with the dapples that I showed you earlier. I like the giraffe because I just like giraffes. I like some of the inside row animals too. There's a couple of really fancy ones on here that I care about with manes. They're all blowing in the wind and flowing around. So I can't pick out one that I like the most. They're all like old friends. And when I look at each and every one of them, I can say, oh yeah, I remember that one. So I haven't forgotten a one. I mean, I know them all very, very well.
That's a safe answer. I don't want to have any fights over favorite animals here. Next question I have here is, how long have you been doing restoration and how did you learn all these techniques?
How did I learn?
How long have you been doing the restoration and how did you learn to do this type of work?
I have a degree in art from East Carolina University, and I taught art in public schools. So I've always been interested in art. And the school system that I was in, I taught for about 6 years, I guess. And the school system that I was in went from, had a bond issue voted down, went from 5 art teachers to 2, and I didn't have the seniority. So I was out at 30 years old. And I just took a while and sat down and thought about what I'd like to do. And I thought, you know, I'd really like to do some kind of conservation restoration work. And it was 2 weeks later that someone came and said, would you like to volunteer to work on a carousel? And this was the carousel, the Dentzel carousel that's in Raleigh, North Carolina. And so I started on that, and we hired a professional conservator who was then working at the North Carolina Museum of Art. And she gave workshops and to the people that I'd hired. And we kind of went from there. And so I and also the North Carolina Division of Archives and History was involved in that project and had some guidelines about original paint. So that's where my introduction to original paint, it became very important to me in every restoration that I do, band organs, the carousel animals, and you know, it's just always been my passion. So I learned by having some experience with paint and then reading and asking people and just going along and developing my skills.
Okay. I have a couple of questions here related to the barrel-shaped ceiling panels. I'm going to read through what they wrote. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but someone says, when Rosa was talking about the barrel-shaped ceiling panels, she mentioned original cardboard-like panels. I did not catch the name. We can see in photos of our carousel from the 1920s that it had ceiling panels of some sort. They are long gone, and we've been trying to figure out what they were made of. So I'm now very curious about this material. Would love to know more.
The ceiling panels are made of a wooden frame that is probably very lightweight, and the frame is arched, which makes the barrel part, and then that is covered with a material called UPSOM, UPSOM board. Not easy to find. It's like a thick, glorified cardboard. It's very dense, much denser than normal cardboard. If you walk on the frame goes from sweep to sweep around the carousel. And if you go up top and walk on the sweep between the ceiling panels, it's kind of scary. And if you step off the sweep, your foot goes through the ceiling panels. And I did do some repair where feet had gone through ceiling panels in the past. So, and I repaired that with UPSOM board. I managed to find it somewhere in, I think a lumber company near us happened to have it. And I'm not sure where you would find it today, but it's lightweight. If you put any other kind of material up there, it would be way, way, way too heavy. But it's very lightweight and makes a nice finish product, really.
Okay. Kind of a follow-up question to that. Can you explain what the sweep is and what that phrase means?
Maybe. Mechanics is not my forte, but the sweep is the section. If you look at a carousel, there are arms that radiate out from the center, and those are the sweeps, and they are actually the support of everything. There are guy wires that tie from the sweeps to the center pole, but those sweeps support the animals and the ceiling panels, and very important part of a carousel. And that's about all I can tell you. I'm just not, like I said, mechanics are not my forte.
Okay, fair enough. Again, another related question: why was this UPSOM board used, or why were these panels done on that fiber board?
Why was UPSOM board used? Lightweight.
Okay. The next question I have here is when using a stripper versus sanding, is less of the lead paint emitted?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that question.
So I believe they're referring to, you mentioned at the beginning, you used paint stripper instead of something like a sander, like an orbital sander or something to remove the paint. Why was stripper used as opposed to sanding?
I find paint stripper much more controllable than a sander. I never used a sander on them. I used sandpaper that I could control myself, but not a sander. The paint stripper that I used on the ceiling panels, I didn't show you a photograph, but I divided the ceiling panels into squares about 9 inches by 9 inches. And I figured out how long I could leave the particular paint stripper that I was using. I figured out how long I could leave it there and timed it. It might be, I might have been able to leave it on for 6 minutes. And then when the timer goes off, I had to get it off. And so I would scrape it off or wipe it off, and it would go down to the original paint layer. Now that doesn't always work. Every single piece is really different. So you have to experiment with different methods and different tools from your tool chest for stripping and find the best one. For the ceiling panels, that worked for all of them, is to time these squares. It was not a quick process. It took some time. And again, it was using materials that are not that healthy to use. Restoration is a dirty business, really is.
Okay. I'm going to start wrapping things up here because we are at almost 8:40, but I'm going to do a couple more questions here. In going through all the various layers of paint, did there seem to be any logic to the colors that were applied? In other words, did the painters seem to be striving to recapture the original look, or were the painters indulging in their own aesthetics?
I couldn't hear that because of an airplane.
Oh, that's all right. You're right in the flight path there. So let me repeat that for Rosa here. In going through all of the various layers of paint, did there seem to be any logic to the colors that were applied? In other words, did the painters seem to be striving to recapture the original look, or were the painters indulging in their own aesthetics?
I think the painters, maybe the first layer after the original layer, the first year that they repainted it, maybe a little bit. There I would find maybe a little bit of pinstriping and all that, but nothing like the variety of the detail and the pinstriping and the scroll work that was painted on the animals originally. I mean, it was just fabulously beautiful. And so no, and then after the first repainting, it seemed like they were just putting a coat of paint on. And thank goodness they did, in a way, because it protected it for many, many years. And 20 layers of paint is pretty protective stuff. So, but no, they didn't seem to be trying to achieve anything like the original layer and any other layer except maybe that first repainting.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and finish with this last question here. Before I do, Rosa, if anybody wants to get in touch with you to learn more about your restoration work, if they have further technical questions, what's the best way for them to do that?
That is a really hard question. I would suggest that they maybe look around the area. I know there's some schools in Western North Carolina that teach restoration. I think Biltmore House has a restoration workshop school. And there may be others in the country that I don't know about, but that's really a hard thing. I think that I was lucky to start when I started and being given the opportunity to learn kind of on my own. But you can ask questions of people that do restorations. You can, that's all I know to say. I could not recommend how you would go about doing that.
Okay.
And you work for somebody who does restorations, that kind of thing. Apprentice with somebody.
Okay. If they wanted to get in touch with you to ask you questions, what's the best? Is there an email address or or something they can?
Yes, I have an email address and I have a website. The website is simply rosapatton.com. And I think you can message me through that website.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Yeah, and that's ROSAPATTON.com.
It's ROSAPATTON.
All right. And then just the last question here, because I think it's a good one to close on. How durable is the paint and its cover coats now? And then how long do you think it will take before additional maintenance or restoration will or may be necessary?
I'm sorry, another airplane.
My timing is not great here. That's okay. So how durable is the paint and its cover coats now? And how long do you think it will take before additional maintenance or restoration will or may be necessary?
I still can't hear.
How long do you think this will last before you?
Oh, well, there are animals. How long will it last before you have to do it all over again? There are animals on here that have been done for 40 years and they have not been redone. They have been very well taken care of. The Park Service took really good care of them. The partnership is now taking really good care of them. And that makes all the difference in the world in a carousel. If you keep up with it and repair it, I think this one is repaired every couple of years, and the paint and anything else that needs to be done to it. So this Indian horse, which is actually the second horse that I did, has been done for, I think I have redone the roses. I've redone the roses on it, but it's been redone for at least 35 years and it's still, you know, in great shape.
Okay, well, that's encouraging. That's a great answer. Emily, did you have any closing thoughts before we wrap up here? I forgot to ask you that at the beginning, so I apologize. If she is, I don't know if Rosa, is there anything before Emily jumps on the screen? Rosa, is there anything you'd like to say as we close?
No, I appreciate being here tonight, and it's been fun, and I'm happy to have answered questions, and it's great to see the carousel again.
Okay, well, thank you so much, and we'll hand things over to Emily there.
I'll just say we are so lucky to have Rosa. She comes up every other year to touch up everything. So just to answer that question a little bit more, we're constantly taking care of it. That's why it looks so beautiful. So it's thanks to her work and Ron too. Just another plug for this weekend. If anyone wants to come out, Carousel is obviously open. We're open 10 to 6 on the weekends. So come on out, come see the beautiful animals, listen to lots of band organs playing around the park. So we're here all weekend. So we hope that we'll see you here. Thanks, Matt, for all of your support. Montgomery history, it's been amazing for this lecture series. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you both. And lots of thanks in the comments to Rosa. Again, thanks everyone, and have a great evening, and hopefully we'll see you back in the future. And don't forget to visit the carousel. Have a good evening. Bye.